says something like, Facebook stopped your broadcast, so we might just, no, it says we're on here.
I saw it said broadcast now live or whatever.
Yeah. Let me see if it just, okay, we'll keep going with it. Hey guys.
You want to do a take 2 just in case?
No, I mean, I see it. I see it says, and it's showing that people are actively joining to watch, so I don't know.
Well then, it must be working.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. It is Friday, February 5th. And welcome to the book club for movies. Thank you, Chad. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I know we had a moment, but
I mean, that's what it told me. It said that's what the thing.
Oh my God, 14 degrees. I'm so sorry. It is very warm here, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, I'm kind of sweating a little bit.
All natural light.
But thank you guys. Thank you all for joining us today. We will be talking about the movie You've Got Mail for our Cult Classic Friday pick. Before we start anything, though, there was another celebrity passing today, and that was good old Christopher Plummer. He was 91, so, you know, as sad as it is when these people die, it's like, well, he was in his 90s, and, you know, good long life.
You know, he got to have an amazing, big, successful film with him featured in it very prominently. You know, one of my favorite murder mysteries of all time now. He's become a part of at least two of my all-time favorite movies, The Sound of Music. And, you know, I know it's weird to say Knives Out is on that list, but my list of all-time favorite movies goes into like the hundreds. So, you know, it's still honest statement. But I loved him. I've had a crush on him ever since The Sound of Music, in that beautiful green velvet, like Austrian army blazer that he wears, like for most of the first half of the movie. Oh my gosh, I would fall head over heels for him, just like Maria did. Even if he was kind of a jerk in that movie for a little bit, until The Sound of Music. You know, that's what the movie's about. It awakens his spirit and so forth. But no, I loved him, and he finally did win his Oscar, playing an old, like somebody who's really coming out into the gay community for the first time as an old man, like a story that you don't see a lot of or see very frequently. And he finally got his Academy Award for that after all those years. But he's just been an amazing actor who's done so much with his career, and it wasn't like somebody who had not been active for a long time and they just were living quietly. You know, like we were all sad when Olivia de Havilland died too, but, you know, she had retired in luxury in Europe many years ago and, was no longer participating much in media interviews or in films or anything. But, he was somebody who was active and still working. And, so it's a sad loss.
I saw on his IMDb, it looks like they were still filming. It looks like he was doing the voice of Rizzo in Heroes of the Golden Mask. So we'll see if they've completed his voice work or not. But that could be his last film. But he's great. He's great. A good long career. He has, oh my God. He has on his IMDb page, he has 217 acting credits. 217.
He's been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, just very, very active. Clearly, this was his lifelong passion. His first credit goes all the way back to 1953. But he's fantastic. And I forgot. I thought he didn't do his own singing in The Sound of Music. But did he?
I thought he did. I mean, it wasn't like the singing that he was doing required a very wide range. It was very...
Yeah, but I guess he did. I just saw that he has credit for that.
Lots of actors have that ability. Most of them do, there's all that work done to modulate your voice and change the sound of it and so forth. So a lot of actors actually do have that ability, but you don't always get to hear their voices on film. You know, they famously dubbed Audrey Hepburn singing in My Fair Lady, but his singing made the cut. You know, that's pretty impressive for such a long-time beloved musical and someone who's not known for his musical prowess. But yeah, I'll be sad not to, you know, I was hoping maybe there were, you know, obviously he wasn't going to be in another Knives Out sequel, but like another murder mystery. I was hoping like maybe there'd be like this new renaissance. And
he dies very early on in Knives Out. That's
well, I'm like I didn't spoil the movie. It happens right at the beginning. But that's definitely, if you know, if you want to go back and revisit some of his films, definitely Sound of Music. I just watched that recently anyways, but also going maybe watching, I might watch Knives Out again tonight just for fun because I love it so much.
Do I watch a lot of Jim Carrey's films? Yes.
Yes.
So good reaction.
Oh, and Hello in New York City as well. Sorry.
Yes. No, I'm obsessed with Jim Carrey. Love him. Love him, love him, love him. Thank you. Yes, any comparison to Jim Carrey is a huge compliment to me because I idolize that man. Yeah, but rest in peace, Mr. Christopher Plummer. We are looking into adding him to our calendar for next month to really dive into his long career, or maybe for our Oscar month. He is an Oscar winner, but we will definitely be talking more about him soon.
Definitely.
But before we go into You've Got Mail, let's talk about the Aristocats. First off, so I had mentioned yesterday how there were some there's a problematic moment, particularly in the Everybody Who Wants to Be a Cat song, and really just the whole character of this Oriental cat. It's right here on this poster. If you watch this on Disney Plus, there's like a little disclaimer right at the beginning of it that addresses it, and I thought that was really cool that they did that, where they just said like, you know, we chose not to take it out, and that's how I think things like that should be handled. You know, instead of completely canceling it, it's like, let's learn from it. You know, let's teach newer generations that this is something that people used to think was okay. And look how far we've come.
Yeah,
how much work we still have to do to make sure that no offensive content is made like that. So I thought that was cool. That and just, you know, put that disclaimer and, you know, kind of said like, you know, it wasn't okay then, it's not okay now, and, you know, they kind of called themselves out on it. So yeah,
that is their usual thing. So if you watch other films that have problematic or things that are reported to have problematic representation in them, that disclaimer will play before any Disney product on the app.
Someone told me that they had cut out the We Are Siamese song in Lady and the Tramp, or maybe that was just the newer one. They decided to edit that
maybe
out.
That was a video release. It may have been something like that. Maybe. But they don't cut them out of the films anymore because it's also not as useful to just pretend like there was never a period where they did things like this. You know, so I do think it's important for you not to edit stuff out of films because, like you said, you know, this is a picture of exactly. This was that characterization was considered okay, acceptable. When you watch it out, you're like horrified that anyone would ever think it was acceptable. Like, even if you had a stereotypical view of Asian people, I feel like anybody who knows an Asian person would have rejected that type of those. And it was only a few seconds, but those few seconds were like really bad. The inclusion of an Asian cat being a Siamese cat, like that is not by itself a horrible thing, but it's like what you did with the character. Because also it's nice that they had sort of representation, like that jazz group of cats was really a group of immigrants.
Here's the Russian.
Well, they're like one's Italian. They all have accents. They're all from different parts, different countries.
I don't know who this beatnik looking cat. Was he supposed to be American? I don't know where he was supposed to be.
I think it was just supposed to be like a jazz stereotype. Like, this is what you expect of a jazz band who lives on the outskirts of society. It's a pretty common image in a lot of movies. When you see jazz represented, you see them represented in the 60s, particularly through these kind of like hippie type characters with the funny glasses and the like, well, that kind of like that is like part of the scene. So they're just like, oh, we're just transferring the way the scene is represented into making them all cats. So that was supposed to, so I didn't notice any egregious African-American stereotypes. Granted, this is set in France, so there's that. But yeah, that disclaimer they put in front of Aladdin, they put in front of a lot of movies that have controversial moments like that. So it's something that they've adopted lately, which is good. So, look, the Russian cat. So there was a Russian cat. That was right. Yeah, there was like different.
Yeah, there's definitely a German cat, an Italian cat.
None of the other ones got the bad treatment that the Asian Siamese cat did. That was just really weird. The rest of but they're unfortunate. It's unfortunate because the rest of that scene is such a great moment. Like visually, it's very colorful and really nicely put together. I loved the songs in this movie. I know there was a thing about how the Sherman Brothers only 2 of the songs that they wrote made it into the film. But like, the scales and arpeggios number, I totally forgotten about that. And
arpeggios.
I love that. Of course, the title song by Maurice Chevalier. Cats live on cream and loving pats. Natural lemon. I just love that song. Just still sparks pure happiness for me. It brought me back literally to me like pushing a vacuum and like dancing around the living room with like my sisters.
Yeah, it was interesting. I said that I hadn't seen this for a good like 20 years, but it all just came back to me because I guess I used to watch it quite a bit when I was little. So then it was like, oh yeah, like now I remember this, and then now this is going to happen, and this, I don't know, it was really just like revisiting an old friend. I was just so happy watching this movie. It was cats, and I love watching all the cats, and I loved
how they animated them.
Berlioz and Marie, and they're just.
Well, also the names of the cats, like the names of some of the animals, was also like obviously Roquefort for the name for a type of cheese for a mouse is a funny name, but like the little kittens are all named after famous French people, like Marie. I would assume not Marie Antoinette, but maybe Marie Curie. We'll just go with Marie Curie instead of Marie Antoinette there. But the other one is was a famous French composer, and that's the one that plays the piano. The one who paints is named Toulouse-Lautrec. And there's like almost some of the images of Paris, the way they draw, and they almost very slightly resemble Toulouse-Lautrec paintings.
Now, our other French animated cat movie we're going to watch in 2 weeks, Gay Paris. That one has a lot of similarities to a lot of French artwork, like really obviously. So that'll be fun after we watch that to kind of compare the 2 French animated cat movies. The dog hicks in France, they were fun. I think one of my favorite lines in the whole movie was, "Where's my Betty Bye basket?"
Yeah. And one of those dogs was the same voice of the sheriff in Robin Hood.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can hear the voices of like the Disney, like
all those movies
actor repertory that they sort of bring in for all these movies. But no, I love, because I mean, all of these like those dogs, like Dogs in the Countryside and Stacks of Hay, it's like also part of this sort of, it seems like something out of a painting that you've seen before, or some, images you've seen of, I love that. I just like seeing how they brought all those things into the story. How many different ways you can make a cat story interesting. I'm all for it. The animation was like a little, every now and then it felt a little rough around the edges, but it also had a really nice movement to it. Like you could see a lot of lines and stuff, but also I thought the actual movement of animation was really nice. Like the movement of her, like her scarf and her boa and the way the cats slink around, like all of that. It seems like the animators actually did do a really good job with the movements of the characters, but it felt like there was some unfinished touches here and there, which I didn't remember, but I didn't really care. I still thought that the drawings were actually really nice. It was, still a little flatter, not as much dimension as other Disney movies.
No, I
some
think
scenes.
it's for 2D animation. But I think that was just kind of also the style they were going for then. But I think this movie is really just about the ultimate cat lady of Madame. I mean, at the end, you know, she's like, I'm gonna start a home for cats. And you're like,
Well, her home was a home for cat. That's the thing. I always never understood. I'm like, I don't understand why this butler who's going to inherit everything when the cats dies. I'm like, really? Like, even if these cats live another, like, first of all, you are in charge of the house. Like, obviously, you will be the one in charge of the money. The cats will not be paying the mortgage. The cats will not be ordering food. The cats will not be paying servants. Like, they won't do any of those things. You know, they won't be able to review his purchases and deny him a vacation, you know. But, like, why didn't you just wait? Just take the situation as it is, knowing you'll still get everything. You'll still have everything when she dies. I mean, first of all, she's not going to die for a while anyway. She seemed pretty lively, even if she was old. You know, she had at least another good 10 years in her, too. And by then, you know, Duchess may have passed on. Whatever the case is, he could have still had all that money he did not need to try to ditch these cats so cruelly multiple times. I'm like, you got exactly what you deserved. However, it did remind me of a moment in The Simpsons where there was an episode, it was like a flashback episode where Homer and Marge are shopping for houses and they're looking, like, they find a house that they like, but it's like filled with cats. And so they're like, oh, like, this place is nice, but like, you know, can we do something about the cats? And like, well, technically the cats own the house. You'd be their tenants, you know? I'm like, oh, this is a thing.
I like how the most faraway place is always Timbuktu.
You know, another sign of the times. Did you see on the label also underneath Timbuktu, it said French Equatorial Africa. So at the time the movie was made, that area was still like
or maybe the early 1900s.
At the time of the story, yeah. So they went for a historic authenticity, I guess, with that extra little touch in there to be like, oh, at this point when this story takes place, this part of Africa was actually under French control. An interesting little historical thing I just happened to notice. I'm like, oh, that's not something I usually see.
I'm not fully versed on the history of jazz, but I don't know how much jazz there was in 1910. But maybe it was just starting to trickle in. I don't know. That seemed like maybe add another decade at least.
Well, you know, they weren't in the mainstream, so, you know, they were.
That's true. That's true. Maybe I just didn't know about that. But yeah, this movie was just really fun to watch again. I definitely laughed out loud a couple of moments, even just random things like when the dogs were chasing the butler on the motorcycle and they like go into the river and then just like over the bridge really fast. Like, and I don't know, I laughed. I thought that was really funny. Just really random. But if you haven't seen,
watched it with her cats. Aww.
I watched it with my cat. Yeah. It was she was asleep for a lot of it, but maybe she was dreaming of cats and she's going to start a jazz career. I don't know.
I watched it with the memory of my cats.
Yeah. But really cute. I love Marie. Marie is still, you know, the most popular character from this. You could get Marie Disney merchandise everywhere.
That line that I'd never noticed on a shirt at Disneyland before, but now I want to go get one. Ladies don't start fights, but we finish them.
Yeah, if you look into any Marie merchandise, there are a lot of things that have that on there. And yeah, but it was just fun. Really, really fun. If you haven't seen it, it is available on Disney Plus. But let's move on to some human content. You've Got Mail. So this is one we knew we couldn't get away from not doing some romantic comedies in February. And this was one, every time we do a calendar, Samir and I each have our, like, you know, we are going to die on this hill. We're not letting this go. I really want this one on here. And this was one, Samir was like, You've Got Mail. That is my choice. We're doing this. Like, we decided, like, for every Friday, like, okay, I'll pick one that's like, I really, really want this. And then we would, like, next week's was a no-brainer. We were like, we both love Down with Love. We're doing this.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is one of Samir's favorites. It's been a long time since I've seen this, so I'm excited to revisit this. But this came out in 1998. Book superstore magnate Joe Fox or Magnate.
Magnate, that's fine.
Magnate. Book superstore magnate Joe Fox and independent bookshop owner Kathleen Kelly fall in love in the anonymity.
Anonymity.
It's missing an
and
it's spelled
anonymous anonymity.
Anonymity. In the anonymity of the internet, both blissfully unaware that he's trying to put her out of business. Now, what was you said this is basically a remake or like same story adaptation. What was the original one called again?
This is based on the film The Shop Around the Corner by Ernst Lubitsch.
Okay.
It starred Jimmy Stewart. And in that movie, what it was is that they were pen pals. So it was sort of like one of those things you could like, it was sort of like the early version of like a Tinder or a Bumble where you would, only there were no pictures. It was like sort of like ads and you would find a pen pal or a romantic pen pal. And they became pen pals. So they fell in love through their letters and they had never actually met. And then the woman comes in to apply for a job at the same shop. This all takes place in Budapest, even though Jamie Stewart is there pretending to be Hungarian with a totally American accent. Almost nobody speaks like Jamie Stewart. But it takes place in Budapest, Hungary. And but they're both working in the same shop, this little shop around the corner. And they are sort of combative in person. They don't get along in person. They seem to be constantly arguing about this or that. They don't get along, but in the letters, they are like completely in love and they don't realize that the person that they're fighting with at their work every day is the person in the letters. And so it's a really beautiful, it's a great concept, first of all. And it's a really beautiful film, very funny, romantically. It's a great romance, I think. It's really very touching. And I thought this is one of the few times You've Got Mail where a movie was remade where it just made perfect sense. Like, a lot of times you get remakes where it's like, okay, they're not doing this for any other reason except they just want to sort of mine the same material. They're going to have all the characters be the same and you're just going to change it to a new city and there won't be any real reason for this to exist. It won't, sometimes it doesn't make sense because, that movie that they're remaking was made in a different time and place. So the cultural and social mores don't really match up with the time that you're making it in. So there's always this weird problem when you're trying to remake some of these old romantic movies. This one just made perfect sense because you had to find a way, how would people fall in love without knowing each other or seeing each other in person? And so, going through like the 70s and 80s, that seemed not quite as possible. It didn't seem like the culture had sort of moved past this phase where you would do things like write each other letters from an ad in a newspaper into like, okay, well, you should go out and meet people and this is how you find your partner. You don't do then we sort of started transitioning back into the letters and ads, only it was done on the internet. And it sort of gave that anonymity back to people. And so it just made perfect sense that these people would have met in a chat room, gotten on, and found that maybe there's a little bit more simmering underneath their conversation as they kept talking to each other and really liking each other. So it's like, in a way, by not being in person, you are able to be more your full self than you are in public, where you have put on every human being puts on a sort of public persona that they present to other people, depending on your social situations. And the only place that people now are really sort of more honest is when that face-to-face interaction is removed and you're just writing. So people are a little freer, they're a little more themselves. So it made perfect sense that it totally translated into the modern world in a way that made it, I think, timeless in a way, because we will always remember this time if we grew up now, but it'll always be a good document of the time and still make sense because this phase of our culture has really lasted for a very long time. This is not just a blip, in the century. But of course they found a way to use the Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan alchemy that had become so famous to do it. Sleepless in Seattle was before.
Yes. And that was just dare I say it, sleeper hit.
I see what you did there.
I'll be here.
But I also worked in a bookstore at the time I worked in a bookstore, I think a year after I saw this movie. But when I was working in the bookstore, like that became a huge part of my identity too. I really, really, really loved that job. I loved the people I worked with. I worked at Borders back when it was a thing before it became the horrible thing that it became. It was a really amazing place. And you were working with people who had PhDs in English and real artists who, like, amazing people who had so much knowledge about so many different fields of art and literature. And like, you could learn so much from that existence, and you had a real bond with other bookstore people. So unfortunately, I worked for the Joe Fox mega bookstore chain and not for Kathleen Kelly's little bookstore. But, you know, there's all these little nods to the original, like the name of her bookstore is The Shop Around the Corner, which is the name of the film that it's remade from. But really, if you've seen The Shop Around the Corner, it does maintain pretty much all of the major beats of the story. And I'm amazed constantly at how well they work in a modern context in this film. However, it is charmingly still dated in a way because it's fully bought into the AOL thing, as like that they've worked into the context of the movie. So you get the sounds that you remember from AOL in the 90s. And it's charming in that sense as well. So it added an extra patina of charm for me over time.
For musical
I just love this movie.
For musical fans, The Shop Around the Corner was adapted into a musical called She Loves Me. If you ever get a chance to see that, it's really cute. I got to see it in San Diego about a year ago, pre-pandemic, like by a few months. And it's really cute. It's just like, yeah, it's delightful. So if you like this story concept and if you like musicals, then hopefully you'll get a chance to see that on a stage somewhere. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, they were just like, well, Meg Ryan, she's been with a few, she's just like the romantic comedy queen of the 90s and late 80s with When Harry Met Sally, then Sleepless in Seattle, then this. But I think a lot of people were desperate to see Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan back together for another movie.
After Sleepless in Seattle, they wanted another movie. And I was like, okay, I thought if you're going to bow to that pressure, like they at least, okay, if we're going to repeat ourselves, at least with this pairing to give people some, this endorphin release or whatever the trigger is, they want the same thing, to trigger that release of dopamine. So they need more Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. They did it at least in a way where, like, hey, they took a story and found a relevant, meaningful way to bring it into the modern times at that time. Like, I just feel like that's a really big thing you just don't see people put that kind of effort into a movie. Usually there's a way in which they're trying to like show how much we've grown since the outdated representations in a movie. So they kind of go overboard with trying to correct for that and keep the story the same. Like, there's all that kind of weirdness. This movie is just free of all that. It's I think my favorite Nora Ephron movie. Like, I'm not the biggest Nora Ephron fan, but I do acknowledge that she also brought a voice into Hollywood that was missing, like the female perspective on a romantic comedy. Like, she actually tried to bring that in, and she was very, very successful in doing it. And I don't think this movie got the credit it deserved, because everyone kind of thought like, oh, she's just repeating herself. This is a rehash of Sleepless in Seattle. And I think it is completely different from Sleepless in Seattle. I think it's better. I actually think this is the better of the two movies. It also came out, you can see the date on the poster you got. It came out around Christmas time. There's a really beautiful like section in the movie around the holidays. I think the movie is also just really sincere in the way it actually uses the culture of people who work around books. Like, that's like a real thing they really bring into this movie as well. So I was very touched by that. And I don't know, there's so many elements that just, I think, bring it a step above so many other Hollywood romantic comedies of the day. And also young Dave Chappelle, it has a small role in this movie. Okay. He's Tom Hanks's friend in this film. And
poster. Parker Posey, Gene Stapleton, Dave Chappelle, Steve Zahn. Wow, that's a cast.
Yeah, it's got a really interesting group of characters. I think it's funny in the right ways. I don't think it's ever really offensive to anybody, but who knows? I think I watched it over the holidays, but I don't recall anything weird in it.
Well, we'll talk about it on Monday if there is.
Yes, but no, I love it. I guess what matters to me most, I think, is if there's a sincerity to the story you're telling. If you can tell somebody is very sincere in what they're communicating through a movie. You can, I don't know, you can always feel that. I feel it very intensely. So I'm always very hyper attuned to phoniness. You know, if the emotion that's being put on is, you know, I can just tell when it's not being felt by the people making the movie and it's just being put on to sort of create, you know, can keep the continuity going to get you to tears at the right moment. And I feel like this movie, at least, you know, it's still a Hollywood romantic comedy. We know that it's not going to end with people being miserable, but it takes some turns that you don't expect. You know, it actually puts real roadblocks in the way, and it takes on this, like, the actual problem of, like, okay, well, how do this people transit? How does somebody who, once they figure out who the other person is, how do they transition that into a real relationship that they want? And so it actually poses that. So it, ironically, in trying to give people that dopamine fix, it does retain one element of creepiness and transfers it, because in Sleeps in Seattle, it's like she's just stalking him because she heard him on the radio. I mean, that's basically what's happening in that movie. And in this movie, they kind of reverse it, and Tom Hanks does, there's one section where it's kind of questionable, I would say, a little bit. I'm like, okay, that just seems overly cruel, but at the same time, you'll see it. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. I assume people have already seen this movie and know what happens. But there's also an actual effort to show people trying to build that relationship, kind of like what we saw in How Stella Got Her Groove Back. Like an hour into the movie, you're like, oh, she found the fantasy man. She's had the great experience. There's more movie left. Oh, it's them actually realizing, how do you make this relationship work when you bring it out of the fantasy world and into your regular everyday world? So I realize this is another movie that sort of acknowledges that step. It doesn't just sort of jump over it to like, okay, and now we're all happy and now we're living together and life is a paradise, you know. No, it doesn't. It's a little longer because it actually insists on putting that step in there. So it's fun. I still enjoy it. Of course, it's got the same kind of soundtrack you expect from Nora Ephron movies. You know, the great pop soundtrack. But I think all the notes it hits, I think it hits them really strongly and sincerely. And you just get that so rarely. And it's a remake it's actually a remake that I like. I usually hate remakes a lot.
It's hard to pull off a solid remake and adapt it to whatever era it is remade in, but it sounds like this is a winner. This is available on Hulu to watch.
Yay!
Who knew? It's on Hulu. I'm just full of it today. I'm really looking forward to watching it this weekend. It is Friday, which is our Patreon Appreciation Friday. Samir, why don't you read off those names for me while I give our little Patreon link over here?
Well, we'd like to thank everybody who contributes to our Patreon. It really, really, really helps us out. We pay for a lot of streaming services. Amy pays for this platform that we use to broadcast. So we really put a lot of ourselves into bringing this show every day. So anything you'd like to contribute would be great. And of course, we have Walter, who's at the day player stage, but he also made a separate donation that gave him screenwriter status to join Julia LaJoie. I keep saying LaJoie because that's how you used to say it. Somebody told me it was LaJoie and it's wrong.
It is LaJoie, but it's also LaJoie.
But nonetheless.
So LaJoie is definitely like the middle ground. My whole family all says LaJoie. It's supposed to be LaJoie, and that's how I've been saying it professionally, is LaJoie.
Oh, good.
It's how it's supposed to be pronounced in French.
I correctly corrected it. Yes, dear Aunt Julia LaJoie is on our screenwriter tier, which gives you the opportunity to pick a movie for us to watch and talk about on the show. Crystal has elevated herself to screenwriter and is sticking with it, I hope, because we love her choices.
Yeah.
We have our production assistants. Those are $5 a month tiers. So our production assistants, Nicole Flax Tatlock, Andres Gallego, and Donna Robinson. Thank you so much to everybody for joining at any of the tiers. But Amy has posted a link if anybody watching today would like to join one of those lower tiers, just to say, hey, we love your work. It's fun to watch you. We would be glad to have any love you want to share.
Yeah, it really does all add up. Even this small but mighty group right here,
Yeah.
it has helped. It's to the point where because when we first started, for a while, I was like, okay, well, it's still not even covering the cost of me using. It cost me $30 a month to even use Be Live, which is what we're using right now. So now it's the point where we have achieved that, which is good. And then, it helps. Again, we don't get paid to do this. We've been doing this, or I've been doing this since March, creeping up on a year.
Probably. Oh my God, what are we going to do for our 1 year anniversary?
I don't know. I mean, that's coming up. I'll have to find out the exact date of when I had started it, but it was kind of like 3/4 of the way into March. So it's gonna be yeah, that's crazy. But we really, really appreciate it. If you're interested, yeah, we plug it every day, but we always do our Patreon appreciations on Friday. But please, this weekend, watch You've Got Mail. Again, it's available on Hulu. Monday, we will be back with our delectable Man Crush Monday of Mr. Denzel Washington. One of the, only the second Black actor to win Best Actor. And we did not pick the film that he won Best Actor for, but we picked one that he was nominated for, and some of us think that he should have won for this movie because he's fantastic in it. But please watch You've Got Mail. Join us on Monday to discuss after the movie, followed by our talk on Mr. Denzel Washington. I mean, he's Denzel. You don't have to say Washington. You know who we're talking about.
We know.
It's Denzel. He has achieved one name status. Everyone knows who he is. But thank you guys for watching. Have a fabulous weekend, and we'll